A black woman walks onto a plane with a confirmed first-class ticket. But when she gets to her seat 2A, it's already taken. They say it's a system error. She knows better. What no one realizes, she's not just another passenger. She's the CEO of the company that's about to buy the entire airline. And with one quiet decision, she changes everything. This isn't just about a seat. It's about power presence and what happens when dignity refuses to shrink. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. The first sign that something was wrong came not with confrontation, but with silence. A loaded, heavy kind of silence that rolled through the first-class cabin like pressurized air before a storm. Jasmine Cole stood in the aisle, still holding her boarding pass in hand, her black leather carry-on balanced confidently on her shoulder. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Everything about her presence, from the sharp cut of her midnight blue suit to the steel in her gaze, spoke volumes. And yet the flight attendant, standing in front of her, a woman named Heather, with flawless lipstick and panic simmering just under her composed exterior, tried to pretend this was normal, that this wasn't what it looked like. There's been an aircraft switch due to mechanical needs, Heather explained quickly, too quickly. We had to reconfigure the seating. Unfortunately, we no longer have your first-class seat available. Jasmine tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. She had spent a lifetime being underestimated. She knew exactly what it felt like when a door was closed politely in your face. That's strange, she said calmly. I confirmed this reservation 48 hours ago. I checked in on time. And I'm standing here with a boarding pass for seat 2A. Heather glanced down at the tablet in her hand, then flicked her eyes to the man currently reclining in 2A. He didn't bother to look up from his tablet. A white man, mid-50s, dressed in business casual that screamed inherited power, the kind that didn't require polish, because comfort had always been his birthright. I understand your frustration, Heather said, her tone slipping into rehearsed sympathy. But we've reassigned you to a seat in Economy Plus. I assure you, it's a very comfortable. Do you know who I am? Jasmine's voice was soft, but it cracked through the cabin like thunder. Not as a demand for celebrity recognition, not as a flex, as a warning. A quiet surgical question that asked, do you know what kind of mistake you're making? Heather faltered. Around them, the other passengers began to shift in their seats, sensing the stakes. A few lowered their reading material. A couple leaned in subtly. The man in 2A looked up at last, annoyed, as if someone had just ruined the best part of his podcast. I'm not asking for special treatment, Jasmine said. I'm asking why my confirmed first-class reservation made under executive status has been voided without notice, and why someone who boarded after me is now seated in my place. Heather opened her mouth, closed it again, then turned to signal for her supervisor. But Jasmine didn't need the answer. She'd seen it too many times. She'd sat through too many miscommunications, too many procedural inconsistencies to not know when the invisible math of power and bias had been used against her. 25 years. That's how long it had taken her to get here. To rise from scholarship kid with secondhand textbooks to CEO of one of the most dynamic logistics companies in North America. She hadn't inherited her title. She'd bled for it. She'd learned early that being right wasn't enough. She had to be exceptional. Twice as good, 10 times more prepared. And even now, with billions in acquisitions under her belt, keynote speeches at global conferences, and a Forbes profile hanging in her office, she could still be mistaken for someone who didn't belong in seat 2A. But this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Not this time. Because what no one in the cabin knew, not Heather, not the supervisor now rushing down the aisle, not the man gripping his cup of orange juice with increasing tension, was that Jasmine Cole wasn't just any passenger. She was the woman finalizing the acquisition of this very airline. And in 30 minutes, she'd be in a boardroom, making decisions that would redefine its future. This flight was meant to take her to San Francisco, where she would sign the final integration papers of the merger between Stratavia, Global her company, and Westmount Air. A deal valued at $3.9 billion. She was the architect of it. The force that had rescued Westmount from the brink of insolvency. But this morning, someone behind a terminal screen, maybe out of ignorance, maybe out of spite, had decided her name didn't match the first-class roster. And that decision, small as it seemed in the vastness of corporate systems, was about to change everything. Jasmine didn't shout. She didn't demand apologies. Instead, she stepped aside, pulled out her phone, and began typing an email to her chief of operations with a single subject line, "Pause acquisition." Then she opened her voice memo app and quietly began to record the interaction unfolding in front of her. The explanations, the contradictions, the uncomfortable glances, every detail, every thread, because this wasn't just about her. It was about how many others had been shifted quietly to the back, their names erased from manifestos by algorithms designed without them in mind. When the airline's ground manager finally arrived breathless and smiling too wide, he began to apologize. Profusely. Claimed it was all a clerical glitch. That someone in overnight operations must have reshuffled the reservations during the aircraft switch. That it wasn't personal. Jasmine simply nodded. "Understood," she said. "Just one thing. Yes, make sure the board is still expecting me in 30 minutes. Because I'd like to discuss what culture this company is truly cultivating and what seat they expect me to occupy at that table." She stepped back, still composed, still quiet, and made her way toward the Economy Plus section without another word. As she passed through the cabin, heads turned. Some watched with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with that embarrassed discomfort that comes from knowing something wrong is happening, but not knowing how to stop it. She didn't need them to speak. She didn't need them to protest. She had other tools, sharper ones, the kind forged in boardrooms and mergers and policies that outlasted outrage. Jasmine Cole had not built her empire by waiting for permission. And by the time this plane touched down, neither would Westmount Air. The flight had taken off, cruising smoothly above the clouds, but beneath that calm exterior, Jasmine Cole was unraveling a quiet war. Not the kind that made headlines or raised voices, but the kind that left bruises and silence on dignity, on trust, on years of earned respect. She sat in 14C, the aisle seat in Economy Plus, her long frame folded into the space like an afterthought. Her suit jacket, once sharp and dignified, now creased uncomfortably against the narrow armrest. She glanced out the window, not to admire the view, but to distance herself from the absurdity of what had just occurred. A woman who was hours away from finalizing a multi-billion-dollar merger had been told her presence in first class was a mistake. A system glitch, they said, an unfortunate oversight, and yet every part of her knew better. Her phone rested on her lap, silent but alert. She had already sent the initial directive to her chief operating officer: freeze all negotiations with Westmount Air. No explanation, no warning, just a line of text that would ripple across conference rooms by the time the plane landed. Jasmine didn't make impulsive decisions. Her entire career had been built on measured strategy. But this was not just personal. It was symptomatic. Across the aisle, a teenage girl watched her curiously. Jasmine offered a small, polite nod. The girl looked away, quickly, embarrassed to have been caught. Jasmine had learned to read those glances not out of admiration, but recognition. The girl had seen it too. The moment power is ignored because it doesn't wear the expected skin. 30 minutes earlier, Jasmine's seat had existed in the system. Now she was here, invisible again. The excuse had been offered with a smile: equipment change, reassignment, nothing to be done. But the man sitting in 2A hadn't been reassigned. The man who had arrived late. The man who had stretched his arms across both armrests like he'd been born with the right to comfort. Jasmine opened her tablet. She didn't need to wait until the board meeting. She began pulling up the integration documents line, items, HR reports, internal culture reviews from Westmount's past 3 years. She had already flagged some concerns weeks ago: disproportionately low minority leadership, internal whistleblower complaints that had been quietly settled, a pattern of tone-deaf messaging during crisis responses. She had been willing to work through it, willing to lead the transformation from within. Now she wasn't so sure. She tapped into the secure company portal and opened the employee conduct logs for Westmount's operations department. The night shift supervisor on duty during the seat change, Bryce Morton. 26 years with the airline. Known for his old-school values, according to HR reports. No formal complaints, but multiple interpersonal incidents noted. Jasmine made a mental note. She didn't believe in coincidences, especially not ones that conveniently demoted the only black woman executive flying first class on a plane she was about to buy. The captain's voice broke through the overhead speakers, announcing that the plane had reached cruising altitude. Beverage service would begin shortly. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, taking a breath, steadying herself. This wasn't just about the seat. It was about every boardroom where she'd been spoken over. Every press interview where her name was spelled wrong. Every polite smile that masked discomfort at her presence. A flight attendant approached with a cart. "Would you care for something to drink?" she asked, her voice clipped but courteous. "Just water, thank you," Jasmine replied. The attendant returned with a cup. "And again, ma'am, we're really sorry for the earlier confusion. It's just one of those system things." Jasmine accepted the drink, but not the apology. She smiled thinly. You know, the phrase "system thing" has covered a lot of injustice in this world. The attendant blinked, unsure of what to say. "I'll pass your feedback along." "Please do," Jasmine said, her voice calm. "And tell your supervisor that I look forward to our meeting in San Francisco." The woman moved on. Jasmine didn't watch her leave. Back on her tablet, she opened a blank page and began drafting a new policy framework, one that would become mandatory for any company acquired by Stratavia moving forward. Diversity, transparency metrics, customer experience, bias, auditing frontline decision-making oversight. She wasn't going to let this pass with a few thousand frequent flyer miles and a lukewarm apology. Her thoughts were interrupted by a man tapping her shoulder lightly. She turned. He was in his late 40s, weary-eyed, wearing a conference lanyard and holding a laptop. "Excuse me," he said. I don't mean to intrude, but I saw what happened back there. That wasn't right." Jasmine tilted her head. "Thank you. But I'm fine." He hesitated. "It's just, I work in aviation compliance. I've seen this kind of thing before. It's usually not a mistake." "I know," Jasmine said. Her voice was steady. "And it's going to cost someone a lot more than they expect." He nodded slowly. "Well, whatever you're doing, don't stop." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She wasn't here for validation. She was here for correction. As the plane continued eastward, Jasmine looked down at the draft policy. Then she added a title: Coal Protocol Accountability, Inequity. A part of her smiled. Because when people spoke of her legacy, they wouldn't talk about the seat she lost. They'd talk about what she built when the system tried to erase her. The hum of the aircraft was steady, almost soothing, as Jasmine Cole stared out over the cloud line. Thousands of feet above the earth, everything looked clean, distant, weightless. But inside her, the silence was anything but calm. It was the kind of quiet that happens before a verdict, before a storm breaks open the sky. She had lived long enough in boardrooms and negotiation rooms to recognize this kind of pause, an interlude thick with invisible weight. She sipped from her water untouched, since it was handed to her more out of ritual than thirst. Her thoughts drifted not to the deal waiting in San Francisco, but to the past moments she rarely allowed herself to revisit. She remembered the first time her voice had been dismissed in a strategy meeting, the way the room went still when she suggested something bold, only to hear the same idea echoed and applauded minutes later by a man in a sharper suit and a paler complexion. She remembered standing in an elevator with a venture capitalist who had asked if she was the assistant for the actual CEO. And she remembered the conversation with her father the night before she left for Harvard Business School. Jazz, he had said, there will be days they pretend not to see you. That's when you make sure they can't ignore you. Today was one of those days. The incident in the first-class cabin, the reassignment, the disingenuous smiles, none of it surprised her. She had dealt with polished forms of rejection all her life. What struck her now was how easily it had all fallen into place. A night shift supervisor who didn't like what she represented. A system error that targeted only one name. A series of seemingly small decisions designed to keep power in its usual shape. But Jasmine Cole had not built Stratavia Consulting by accepting usual. Her tablet buzzed with a message from her executive assistant. San Francisco boardroom is confirmed. Legal team standing by. HR has flagged Morton in background review, want us to pull his employment history from former carriers. She typed back, "Yes. Get me everything. We may be dealing with a pattern, not an outlier." The beverage cart passed again. She declined. Across the aisle, the teenage girl was now asleep, her headphones still glowing faint blue. Jasmine watched her for a moment longer than she expected, wondering if the world would be any easier by the time that girl sat in a seat like hers. Or if she too would be asked to move, to shrink, to wait her turn. The plane jolted gently as it crossed into calmer air. The seatbelt sign remained off, but Jasmine noticed how many passengers still gripped their armrests, like something unspoken was holding them in place. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was habit. Maybe, like her, they were waiting for the call that would change everything. She reached for her Mont Blanc pen. The one her father had given her before his final chemo treatment, back when he'd said, "You're going to need something heavier than your voice in rooms like those." She didn't write yet, just held it. Sometimes, memory is enough to sharpen resolve. In the row ahead, a man leaned back and opened his laptop. She caught a glimpse of his screen. He was reading an op-ed about the deal architect behind Wall Street's most surprising acquisition. Her face stared back at her, reduced to pixels, and a quote from a talk she gave 2 years ago. "Transformation is not polite. It's disruptive by design." She smiled faintly. They had no idea how true that would become. Her phone vibrated again. This time, it was a direct message from Stratavia's head of communications. Wall Street Journal is sniffing around about a seating incident. Someone on the flight might have tipped off a stringer. "Do you want us to comment?" Jasmine exhaled slowly. It was already moving. That was fine. Truth had legs, and she wasn't afraid of where it might run. "No statement yet," she replied. "Let them write what they think they know. We'll give them the full picture after the board call." Another buzz, this time from the COO. A single question. "Do we move forward with the clause adjustment?" Jasmine stared at the screen. It was a small change in the acquisition agreement, but one that would alter power dynamics, adding a cultural audit requirement before any integration could begin. It would give Stratavia more control. It would expose biases buried in Westmount's hiring retention and passenger complaint data, and it would send a message no more hiding behind policy and procedure. She typed a single word, "Yes." Somewhere in the back of the plane, a child laughed. A real clear sound. Unfiltered. Jasmine turned, slightly watching a mother play peekaboo with her son. No branding, no power play, just joy. It felt like a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place. Not for control, not for clout, but to shape a world where fewer people had to fight just to take their seat. Then, as if summoned by thought alone, her phone lit up with a new call. Blocked number. She knew who it was. With calm hands, she answered. "This is Jasmine." A beat of silence. Then a man's voice, tight and rehearsed. "Ms. Cole, this is Philip Garner from Westmount's executive office. We've just become aware of a situation involving your flight this morning. I'd like to personally apologize and assure you that," she cut in soft but firm. "Save the apology for the call. I assume the board is assembled." "Yes, of course. They're waiting for you." "Then let them wait a little longer," Jasmine said. "I'll speak when I'm ready." She ended the call and placed her phone face down. The calm was gone now. Only clarity remained. The skyline of San Francisco glittered like a mosaic of ambition as Jasmine Cole's car pulled into the private garage beneath Westmount Aviation's headquarters. She didn't flinch at the security cameras or the small crowd of reporters assembling beyond the barrier. Word had leaked faster than expected, but she wasn't surprised. Stories like this always found oxygen in silence. And Jasmine had no intention of being silent today. She stepped from the vehicle-tailored coat, sweeping behind her, and walked briskly through the lobby with the unshakable calm of a woman who had waited her entire career for a moment like this, only not in vengeance but in purpose. The receptionist didn't ask her name. No one needed to. She had become a symbol overnight, not just of power, but of the price exacted when dignity is dismissed in public and private alike. In the elevator, her general counsel, Liana Torres, met her with a folder in hand and unease in her eyes. "They're nervous," she said, and trying not to show it. Westmount's board assembled 30 minutes early. Bryce Morton's trying to maintain control, but after your call and the early press inquiries, he's lost some footing. Jasmine gave a single nod. Let them keep pretending this is about optics. We'll show them it's about culture. The elevator chimed on the 52nd floor. Glass doors parted to reveal a long corridor of framed photographs. Westmount's founders, its fleet through the decades' glossy depictions of white-gloved flight attendants, smiling in impossible poses. Not one face in the lineup looked like hers. Not one name sounded like hers. Inside the boardroom, a polished mahogany table stretched beneath skylights, and around it sat the faces of Wealth Legacy and Legacy's gatekeepers. 12 directors, 11 men, 1 woman, all white. Jasmine had done her homework. At the head of the table sat Bryce Morton, interim CEO of Westmount, his salt and pepper hair cropped to exacting precision, the sheen of unease poorly concealed by his forced smile. "Ms. Cole," he said, standing, "we're glad you made it." "Please," she cut him off without malice. "Let's begin." Liana distributed the updated acquisition terms as Jasmine moved to the screen at the end of the room. No PowerPoint, no elaborate charts, just her presence, the documents, and a voice honed by years of leading companies through storm and scrutiny. The incident on Flight 610 this morning, Jasmine began, was not an aberration. It was the predictable result of a corporate culture that confuses politeness with professionalism and comfort with competence. And that distinction, gentlemen, is the foundation of my revision to our agreement. Whispers stirred among the board. Bryce cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Jasmine Ms. Cole, the seating issue was unfortunate, and the employee responsible has been placed on leave pending investigation." Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "Bryce, what's more troubling than the incident itself is your eagerness to call it isolated. System errors don't target executives by name. Gate agents don't panic unless there's precedent. And internal supervisors don't risk retaliation unless they believe the culture will shield them." Today was not about a seat. It was about systemic permission. One of the older board members, Philip Green, leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "We have a deal on the table. Are you suggesting it be renegotiated because of a personal inconvenience?" She didn't blink. "I'm suggesting it be completed responsibly. That includes a comprehensive cultural audit, a revised integration oversight structure, and independent review of passenger bias complaints for the past 5 years. If Stratavia is to inherit this organization, it will not inherit rot," another director scoffed. "We've operated for 80 years without your moral supervision. And in that time," Jasmine said calmly, "your net promoter scores have declined. Your workforce diversity remains stagnant. And your internal complaint resolution time has doubled. So I ask you, how's that independence working out?" Liana placed a document in front of Bryce, the internal forum post from Carl Brenner, the supervisor who had manually downgraded Jasmine's seat. It was filled with resentment toward the acquisition-veiled racism and a startling belief that what he did would be protected by Westmount's silence. The room went still. "Your culture breeds this," Jasmine said. "And worse, it protects it." Bryce tried again. "We can work on culture after the merger. The airline needs capital now." Pressing this now only jeopardizes Jasmine's step back from the screen. "Then let me make this clear. Stratavia will move forward with the acquisition only under the revised terms. Those terms include immediate oversight into HR operations, board-level representation for DEI policy implementation, and a public accountability framework. If that is unacceptable, we walk and you go to market with declining stock and rising scandal. Silence. Then Rebecca Langford, the only female board member, spoke. How long will the audit take? 3 months, Jasmine said, with checkpoints and public summaries. Not for show for change. Philip Green looked down at the contract in front of him. This is aggressive. No, Jasmine replied. It's overdue. For another full minute, no one moved. No one spoke. Then Bryce Morton exhaled through his nose and looked around the room. I believe we need a recess to discuss internally. Jasmine nodded. You'll have 15 minutes. After that, I have a flight to catch. She stepped out onto the terrace alone. The sun was beginning to dip behind the Golden Gate. The city stretched out before her wide, weathered waiting. Behind her, 12 people debated power control and compromise. But out here, she felt the quiet of decision settling in her bones. She hadn't built a company from nothing, just to buy broken institutions. She was here to rebuild them. 15 minutes later, the doors reopened. Bryce stood. The board accepts your revised terms. Jasmine simply nodded. Then we begin. Today, no champagne, no applause, just business, just change. And in that quiet moment of victory, Jasmine felt no triumph, only clarity. Dignity did not wait for approval. It demanded accountability, and she had just delivered the invoice. In the weeks following the acquisition, something subtle but irreversible began to shift inside Jasmine Cole. The chaos of headlines faded, replaced by the quiet gravity of responsibility. The ink had dried, the contracts were signed, but what lingered was not the deal. It was the decision she made in that boardroom and the reason behind it. She hadn't simply leveraged power. She had defined it on her terms. It was a morning like any other, when she stood at the window of Stratavia's new San Francisco executive suite, watching the city stir to life. Outside traffic pulsed along Market Street. Inside, a new rhythm hummed, new leadership teams being installed, new training protocols, launched new values, finally being enforced instead of advertised. It wasn't perfect, not yet. But it was progress, and that mattered. She thought of her younger self, seated in rooms where she wasn't supposed to speak first, or speak at all, where her ideas were echoed and applauded only after they were spoken by someone else, where her seat was never at the center, only near enough to observe. Those rooms had taught her that confidence could be misread as arrogance when it came in the wrong skin, the wrong gender. But she had stayed anyway. She had earned her place, then built her own table when the old ones refused her chair. The Cole principle wasn't something she invented. It was something she lived. Power isn't just having the right title, the right contract, or the right to respond when wronged. Real power is knowing without apology or hesitation that you belong. It's refusing to shrink, to edit yourself for comfort, or to wait for someone else's permission to lead. And now, it lived not only in her, but in every corner of the organization she was transforming. In the quiet bravery of the customer service agent who reported a colleague's bias for the first time. In the cabin crew who requested training to better understand the experience of passengers like Jasmine. In the new, higher orientation sessions where inclusion was not a footnote, but a founding principle. Jasmine didn't need applause to feel the shift. It was in the way people met her eyes now, in the way her story once whispered in cautionary tones was now told in boardrooms as a case study in resilience. not because she had overcome, but because she had refused to be undone. She hadn't grounded the airline out of anger. She'd done it out of alignment with who she was and what she believed leadership was meant to be. Power used to protect power was nothing. But power used to reset the terms of belonging. That was legacy. And Jasmine Cole had just begun writing hers. Jasmine Cole's story is not one of revenge. It is a story of clarity, courage, and reclamation. It began with a single silent decision made in a first-class aisle in front of passengers who saw her as a disruption rather than a rightful occupant of her seat. But what they didn't see, what they could never anticipate, was that the woman they attempted to erase was the very person holding the keys to their future. From the moment Jasmine was told she no longer had a place in the seat she had paid for, a clock started ticking. Not toward a tantrum, not toward chaos, but toward a reckoning. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She used what she had always relied on: facts, dignity, and an unshakable sense of purpose. And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim her seat, she recalibrated the structure around it. Jasmine didn't fire people to prove her point. She didn't drag reputations through the mud. She made decisions that illuminated a broken system, one that had grown too comfortable in its quiet systemic bias. The airline didn't fall because of her. It was already crumbling under the weight of what it refused to confront. Jasmine simply revealed it, and then she rebuilt. She brought in people who had been silenced. She restructured leadership to reflect the world outside the boardroom. She required uncomfortable conversations and welcomed necessary disruption. In just 90 days, culture began to shift, and the story that started with humiliation ended with a rebranding ceremony led by someone who had once been told she didn't belong. What Jasmine Cole teaches us isn't just about standing up when wronged. It's about standing firm, even when it would be easier to walk away. It's about refusing to internalize injustice, and instead using it as a catalyst for transformation. Her story is a blueprint for what it looks like to lead with both strength and principle. The lesson here isn't just for CEOs. It's for anyone who's ever been told to take a lesser seat. It's for the woman who speaks up in meetings and is ignored, only to hear her idea praised when someone else repeats it. It's for the employee passed over for promotion despite delivering results. It's for the young Black professional navigating spaces never designed with them in mind. Here's the truth. Jasmine lived. Power is not about being the loudest in the room. It's about knowing who you are when the room tries to shrink you. And dignity is not given. It's claimed. Not because someone finally sees you, but because you finally refuse to go unseen. So to everyone watching, if Jasmine's story moved, you inspired, you challenged how you see the structures around you, don't let it end here. Let it stir something in you. Let it remind you that transformation doesn't always start with a speech. Sometimes it starts with 3 simple words. Do you know? Do you know who you are? Do you know what you deserve? Do you know how powerful you already are? If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. We're committed to sharing real stories that ignite change, stories that speak truth to power, and uplift the voices too often left in silence. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from, or which moment in Jasmine's journey hit you the hardest. Together, let's keep these conversations alive. Because someone out there, maybe even you, needs the reminder that your seat at the table isn't up for debate. It's yours. always has been.